Well, while I'm talking about Paul Maxwell, I might as well tell you a little bit more. You know, these YouTube things, you can only, they say keep it to about 5 minutes. Well, some of my stories are kind of hard to keep them to 5 minutes, but I'll see if I can do when Paul Maxwell decided to become Marshal of Alvoy. Now, you know, to be Marshal of a town in Texas depends on what era, and this was back a long time ago. When they, not, well, it wasn't that long ago, you know, it was in the 50s. And but Alvoy is a little old town about halfway between Fort Worth and it was about 56 miles of Fort Worth and 50, 60 miles of Wichita Falls. We lived in Wichita Falls. Mom and we used to go down and see them all the time. Anyway, Alvoy still had that 2 or 3 foot concrete curb down the middle of town there where you could pull those old Model Ts up there and bump against the curb, you know, when the brakes wouldn't work very good. And the old men used to sit around and whittle and spit and play checkers. Paul Maxwell used to cheat. He was my step-grandfather, wasn't my real grandfather, and he cheated at checkers. He played, when I was 8 years old, he played checkers with me, and he'd cheat. I'd watch him move twice instead of once. Anyway, he and those old boys sitting around, I guess you'd call them cronies. And these old boys sitting around thinking up stuff they could do, and down there in front of the general store, and there these semi-trailers, truck trailers, 18-wheelers they called them, coming from Fort Worth and Dallas up the highway, up that 2-lane concrete. Man, that'd go through Alvoy at 60 miles an hour. You know, and they're gone. Well, the old man said, you know, that's kind of dangerous, them truck coming through like that. They're liable to hurt somebody. You know, these, why, nobody had ever been hurt. Never did have a car wreck. Kids never did get run over. But that's kind of dangerous. You know, we got children living around here, and we ought to do something about that. You know, I wonder why the law don't take care of it. And somebody says, well, Henry, we ain't got no law. Well, we ought to have a law. I'd be the law if I had a pistol. Paul Maxwell said, I got a horse pistol. Now, few folks don't know, a horse pistol is the one they used to carry in a saddle scabbard. You know, got a barrel on it about 18 inches long, and they didn't carry it in their hip. They put it on the saddle. That's the reason they called it a horse pistol. You know, I had to hold that thing up with 2 hands, and sometimes it would shoot. Paul Maxwell said, I got a pistol. And they said, well, won't you be Marshal? He said, yeah, I can be Marshal. Of course, he's on a crutch, got a bad hip, and he can barely get along. And first thing you know, that was half dozen old men sitting there, you know, whittling and spitting. And they elected him Marshal. Didn't get a badge or nothing like that, or no money. But he said, yeah, I'll do that. I'll get my pistol. I'll tell you boys, I'll flag them suckers down. I'll tell you what, they won't go speeding through my town. Not my town. Well, we were down there. My daddy was blessed with common sense, and before this took place, when it was all just coming to a head, and Paul Maxwell told my daddy, he said, Sandy, what do you think? I've been elected Marshal down here at Alvoy, and I'm going to start Monday. And my dad said, well, Mr. Maxwell, what are you going to do? He says, I'm going to stop them 18-wheelers speeding through town. You know, they're liable to hurt somebody down there. That's dangerous. And my daddy said, Mr. Maxwell, I don't know if I'd do that if I were you. You know, some of those guys, they're carrying refrigerated food, and they can't afford to stop. And, you know, they got to get to where they're going, and they might not paying attention to you. Well, I got my pistol. You see this thing? Look here, Sandy. I pull that thing out. It's about that, nearly big enough to put to your shoulder, you know. Don't know if it had ever fired before or would then. Daddy said, I don't think I'd do that, Mr. Maxwell, if I were you. I might consider that again. Well, come Monday, Mr. Maxwell. We heard about this later, because it was the talk of the town when Mr. Maxwell is the new Marshal, and everybody turned out to see the new Marshal. Monday morning, he's going to go down there and stop them 18-wheelers come whistling through Alvord there just like it was nothing. So he gets down there, and of course the crowd, and that highway had, there in Alvord, it had an extra wide margin, you might say, on the side of the road. It must have been a good 50 feet to the nearest building, and it was all graveled. Good-sized gravel, not pea gravel, but good-sized gravel, you know, and kind that's good for slingshots. Anyway, they were all folks gathered down there. It's going to be a happening. And here comes Paul Maxwell. And he wore overalls all the time, you know. And I don't think he wore anything under them overalls because it's kind of barrenness showing through here on the sides. And he had, in that little old loop there, you're supposed to put a hammer in. He had that horse pistol stuck down there, and it didn't kind of, it wasn't very balanced very good, you know. And it was just, and that was the side he had the crutch on, and he would come walking up there from where they lived. It was a block over, you know, a block this way and a block this way to the main street and the main heart, and that's where everybody's going to watch this happening. So here come Paul Maxwell. He came down the street and he kind of cut across the pavement there because he's got to go to the other side. That's where he's going to do all this, in the gravel area there. And he got all set up, and it wasn't long to here come an 18-wheeler, and you could see down toward Fort Worth pretty good ways. You know, there's a quarter of a mile down there that you could see them coming. And here comes this 18-wheeler. Well, Paul Maxwell got out there on his crutch. You know, he's out there and he got that pistol out. And he's threatening. That 18-wheeler doing at least 60, maybe more. And he came down. Man, the backdraft on that truck picked Paul Maxwell up, twisted him around, turned him about 3 or 4 loops around this way, off that crutch, dropped his pistol, rolled him around in the gravel, you know, skinned him up. And everybody just wondered, what's he going to do? What's the marshal going to do? Well, I'll tell you what the marshal did. When he kind of finally got up and he found his pistol and found his crutch, and he got up on that crutch, stuck that pistol back in his overalls, and he went back where he came from. He said he was through being marshal. Well, that was a marshal for a day.